The gunshot pierced the evening calm of Willow Creek, Montana Territory, 1876, as Katherine Bennett clutched her dying father's hand. Blood seeped through his shirt while townsfolk scattered for cover. She knew in that moment her life would never be the same. At 22 years old, with no family left and a small ranch to manage alone, Katherine faced a wilderness as untamed as her fear. "Pa, please hold on," she begged, tears streaming down her face as the doctor pushed through the gathering crowd. Her father's eyes, once bright with life, now dimmed as he struggled to speak. "Be strong, Katie," he whispered, using the nickname only he called her. "Don't let them take what's ours." Those were the last words Samuel Bennett spoke before drawing his final breath on the dusty main street of Willow Creek. Katherine's world collapsed as townsfolk murmured around her, their words meaningless against her grief. "Miss Bennett," Dr. Miller said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry. He's gone." Katherine remained kneeling beside her father's body, unmoving as the sheriff dispersed the onlookers. It had happened so fast they had come to town for supplies, and suddenly shots rang out during what appeared to be a bank robbery. Her father, always protective, had pushed her to safety when the bandits fired wildly while making their escape. "Miss Bennett," Sheriff Cooper said, kneeling beside her. "We'll find who did this. I promise you that." Katherine nodded numbly as the undertaker approached. Everything moved in a blur, her father's body taken away, condolences offered, arrangements discussed. She stood alone, an orphan at 22, with nothing but a small ranch miles from town and no idea how to run it alone. "You shouldn't ride back alone tonight," Martha Miller, the doctor's wife, said kindly. "Stay with us. The funeral can be arranged tomorrow." But Katherine shook her head. "I need to go home. The animals need tending." "Then at least let someone escort you," Martha insisted. As if summoned by those words, a tall figure stepped forward from the shadows of the livery stable. "I'll see her safely home, madam." Katherine turned to see a man she recognized only vaguely, the cowboy who'd arrived in town a few weeks earlier, taking odd jobs and keeping mostly to himself. His name surfaced in her memory: Hayes. Hunter Hayes. He stood tall, at least 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a lean build hardened by years of work. His face, partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat, revealed eyes that held both strength and kindness. The stubble on his jawline couldn't hide the determined set of his mouth. "I don't need," Katherine began, but Sheriff Cooper interrupted. "That's good of you, Hayes. Miss Bennett shouldn't be alone tonight." Katherine wanted to protest, but found she lacked the strength. She simply nodded, allowing this stranger to help her mount her horse while he saddled his own. They rode in silence through the gathering darkness, the only sounds being the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and the occasional night creature calling. Katherine's mind reeled with grief and worry. The Bennett ranch wasn't large, but it had been her father's pride, a modest spread with enough cattle to provide a living. How would she manage it alone? The banker in town, Vernon Hollister, had been pressuring her father to sell for months. Now, she suspected, he would redouble his efforts. "Your father was a good man," Hunter Hayes said, breaking the silence as they crossed the creek that marked the halfway point to her ranch. Katherine glanced at him, surprised. "You knew him?" Hayes nodded, his expression solemn in the moonlight. "Not well, but enough to know he was honest. Helped me find work when I first arrived." He hesitated. "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Bennett." "Thank you," she replied, her voice barely audible over the night sounds. When they reached the small ranch house, Hayes dismounted quickly to help her down, his hand strong but gentle at her waist. Katherine felt a strange flutter despite her grief. It had been a long time since any man besides her father had touched her, even in such a practical manner. "I'll see to the horses," Hayes said, leading both animals toward the small barn. Too tired to argue, Katherine entered the darkened house, lighting a lamp with trembling hands. Everything remained exactly as they'd left it that morning, her father's coffee cup on the table, his favorite book on the chair by the fire. The normality of it struck her like a physical blow, and she sank to her knees, finally releasing the sobs she'd held back in town. She didn't know how long she cried, but eventually, a soft knock at the door roused her. Wiping her eyes, she opened it to find Hayes standing awkwardly on the porch, hat in hand. "The horses are settled," he said, his deep voice gentle. I fed the other stock too. Thank you, Katherine replied, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look. You didn't have to do that. It was no trouble. He hesitated, shifting his weight. Miss Bennett, I know it's not my place, but I'd be willing to stay the night in the barn, he added quickly. Just to make sure you're safe. These are dangerous times, and whoever shot your father is still out there. Katherine wanted to refuse, to prove she could manage alone, but practical sense won out. That would be kind of you, Mr. Hayes. I can offer you supper at least. He nodded, following her inside. Katherine moved mechanically, preparing a simple meal of beans, bacon, and coffee. They ate in near silence, the weight of the day's events hanging heavy between them. Mr. Hayes, Katherine finally said, may I ask why you're being so helpful to a stranger? He looked up, his eyes meeting hers directly. Your father gave me work when others wouldn't. Said he didn't care about a man's past, only his present character. Hayes paused, setting down his cup. Besides, my ma raised me to help those in need. And right now, Miss Bennett, you need help whether you want to admit it or not. Katherine couldn't argue with his assessment. Will you tell me about yourself, Mr. Hayes? If you're to be my protector tonight, I should know something about you. A shadow crossed his face. Not much to tell. I was a ranch hand down in Texas, then tried my hand at scouting for the Army for a spell. Been drifting north these past few years, taking work where I can find it. He didn't elaborate further, and Katherine sensed there were chapters of his story deliberately left untold. After supper, Hayes returned to the barn while Katherine prepared for bed, though sleep eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father falling to the dusty street, heard the echo of gunshots. When dawn finally broke, she rose exhausted but determined. There was a ranch to run and a funeral to arrange. She found Hayes in the yard, already tending to the morning chores. He'd milked the cow and fed the chickens, tasks that would have fallen to her. You didn't have to do all this, she said, approaching him as he split wood with powerful, efficient strokes. He paused, wiping his brow. Figured you had enough to worry about. Setting the axe aside, he added, I'll ride back to town with you for the funeral arrangements, if you'd like. Thank you, Katherine said, surprised by his continued kindness. But surely you have work of your own. Hayes shrugged. Nothing that can't wait. They rode to town together, the morning sun warming the spring air. Katherine felt strangely comforted by Hayes's solid presence beside her. In town, they separated Katherine to meet with the minister and undertaker, Hayes to speak with the sheriff about the investigation into the shooting. Katherine arranged for her father to be buried the following day in the small cemetery outside town. As she left the undertaker's office, she nearly collided with Vernon Hollister, the banker who'd been pressuring her father to sell. Miss Bennett, he said, removing his hat. My deepest condolences on your loss. Thank you, Mr. Hollister, she replied stiffly. I wonder if we might speak privately, he continued, his tone sympathetic but his eyes calculating. About your father's outstanding loan and the future of your property. Katherine felt her spine stiffen. This hardly seems the time, sir. Of course, Hollister nodded, replacing his hat. But these matters don't disappear with grief, I'm afraid. The note comes due at the end of the month. Perhaps we could speak after the funeral. Before Katherine could respond, Hayes appeared at her side, his presence imposing. Miss Bennett has arrangements to make today, Hollister. Business can wait. The banker's expression soured slightly as he looked Hayes up and down. I don't believe we've been formally introduced, sir. Hayes. Hunter Hayes. His tone was civil but carried an unmistakable edge. Ah yes, the drifter, Hollister said dismissively. Well, Miss Bennett, my offer stands. I'm sure you'll find managing a ranch alone quite challenging. With a curt nod, he departed. What did he mean about alone? Hayes asked as they walked toward the general store. Katherine sighed. Pa borrowed money last year after the drought killed half our herd. We've been making payments, but... She trailed off, the financial reality of her situation adding to her burden of grief. How much is left owing? $500, she replied. Due at month's end. Hayes whistled softly. That's a hefty sum. Pa had a plan to sell some cattle at the spring auction, Katherine explained. But that's still 2 weeks away. She shook her head. I'm not sure I can manage the drive alone. Hayes was quiet for a moment. You won't have to, he finally said. I'll help you. Katherine stopped walking to stare at him. Mr. Hayes, That's very kind, but I can't ask that of you. You've already done more than enough. His eyes met hers, steady and determined. You didn't ask. I offered. Something in his gaze made Catherine's heart beat faster. This man was a stranger, yet he'd shown her more kindness in one day than most had in years. Why would you do that? Hayes looked away, his expression unreadable. Let's just say I know what it's like to lose everything, he said quietly. And sometimes, a helping hand makes all the difference. The funeral was held the following afternoon, with nearly the entire town in attendance. Samuel Bennett had been well respected, and Katherine was moved by the number of people who came to pay their respects. Throughout the service, Hayes remained a silent, supportive presence at her side. As they returned to the ranch afterward, Katherine finally allowed herself to think about the future. If you're serious about helping with the cattle drive, we should begin preparations tomorrow, she said as they unsaddled their horses. The auction's in 14 days. Hayes nodded. I'll need to round up the cattle scattered in the north pasture first. How many head are we talking? About 30 that are ready for market, Katherine replied. Pa was hoping to get a good price for them. 30's a small herd, but too many for one person to drive alone, Hayes said thoughtfully. We should be able to manage between the two of us, though it won't be easy. That evening, as they sat on the porch after supper, Katherine studied Hayes in the fading light. You never did tell me how you ended up in Willow Creek, she said softly. He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. I was running from something. Or maybe towards something. I'm not sure anymore. What were you running from? She pressed gently. Hayes sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through his dark hair. Memories, mostly. I fought in the war the losing side. Came home to Texas to find my family's ranch burned, my parents dead. Tried to rebuild, but... He shook his head. Some wounds don't heal. So I started drifting. Catherine's heart ached for him. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, he said, though his eyes suggested otherwise. What about you? You ever think about leaving here? She looked out over the land that had been her home for all her 22 years. No, this place is part of me. My mother died bringing me into this world, and now Pa's gone too. But they're both here, in every tree and stone. She paused. I can't imagine belonging anywhere else. Hayes nodded, understanding in his eyes. Then we'd better make sure you keep it. Over the next several days, they worked from dawn till dusk preparing for the cattle drive. Hayes rode out early each morning to round up the scattered herd, while Katherine sorted through her father's papers, trying to make sense of the ranch's finances. The more she discovered, the more worried she became. On the fourth evening, as they sat at the kitchen table reviewing figures, Katherine finally voiced her concern. Even if we sell all 30 head at top price, we'll barely cover the loan and have enough left for supplies to last the summer. Hayes frowned, studying the numbers. What about the fall roundup? You could sell more then. If we make it that far, Katherine said wearily. There's fencing that needs repair, the roof leaks in 3 places, and we need seed for planting. She pressed her hands to her eyes. I'm beginning to think, Mr. Hollister is right. Maybe I can't manage this place alone. You're not alone, Hayes said firmly, his hand covering hers before he seemed to realize what he'd done and withdrew it quickly. At least not right now. Katherine felt the ghost of his touch long after he'd moved away. You can't stay forever, Mr. Hayes. Hunter, he corrected gently. After all this, I think you can use my given name. Hunter, she repeated, the name feeling right on her lips. And you should call me Katherine. Katherine, he said, and something in the way he spoke her name made her pulse quicken. Their eyes held for a moment before he cleared his throat and returned to the figures. We'll find a way to make this work. The next morning, Katherine was awakened by the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly and went outside to find Hunter repairing the corral fence, his shirt already damp with sweat in the early morning sun. You didn't have to start so early, she called, approaching with a cup of coffee. He paused, accepting the cup gratefully. Wanted to finish this before we move the herd to the south pasture. Taking a sip, he added, that roof of yours needs attention too. I know, Katherine sighed. Just add it to the list. Hunter studied her for a moment. When's the last time you went to town? For something other than funeral arrangements, I mean. The question caught her off guard. I don't know. Before Pa died, I suppose. You should go today, he suggested. I saw you were running low on flour and coffee. Besides, might do you good to see people. Katherine started to refuse, then reconsidered. The isolation of grief was beginning to weigh on her. Perhaps you're right. Will you be all right with the herd? I've handled bigger, he assured her with a small smile that transformed his usually serious face. Go on. Take some time. In town, Katherine found herself the object of sympathetic glances and well-meaning inquiries about her welfare. She purchased supplies at the general store, where the owner's wife, Mrs. Henderson, insisted on adding extra coffee on the house. We're all worried about you out there all alone, dear, the older woman said, patting Katherine's hand. Though I hear that Drifter Hayes has been helping you. Katherine nodded, aware of the questioning tone. He's been very kind. Mrs. Henderson leaned closer. Be careful, dear. No one knows much about him. Sheriff says he keeps to himself. Won't talk about where he came from or why. He told me he's from Texas, Katherine replied, feeling strangely defensive. Well, perhaps, the shopkeeper's wife conceded. But there are rumors, you know. Some say he rode with outlaws down south. Others think he might have been a lawman who turned bad. Katherine straightened her shoulders. Mr. Hayes Hunter has been nothing but helpful and honorable since my father's death. I won't listen to gossip. Mrs. Henderson looked chastened. Of course, dear. I meant no offense. We're just concerned for your welfare. As Katherine left the store, she nearly collided with Vernon Hollister once again. Miss Bennett. He greeted her, tipping his hat. I'm pleased to see you in town. Have you given any thought to our discussion? Mr. Hollister, the loan payment isn't due for another 10 days, Katherine reminded him. I intend to honor my father's debt. The banker smiled thinly. Of course, but managing a ranch is difficult work, especially for a woman alone. My offer to purchase your property stands enough to cover the loan and provide you with a tidy sum to start a new life elsewhere. Perhaps back east, where you have family. I have no family elsewhere, Katherine said firmly. And I'm not alone. I have help for the cattle drive. Hollister's eyebrows rose. Ah yes, the mysterious Mr. Hayes. Tell me, Miss Bennett, how much do you really know about this man? Katherine felt her temper rising. I know he's been willing to help when others only offer to take what's mine. The banker's expression hardened. Be careful, Miss Bennett. The West is no place for naive trust. Men like Hayes come and go with the seasons. When he leaves, and he will leave, my offer may not be as generous. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted further down the street. 3 riders had entered town, dust-covered and trail-worn. Katherine wouldn't have paid them much attention except that the sheriff immediately emerged from his office, hand on his gun belt. Miss Bennett, I suggest you conclude your business in town promptly, Hollister said, his eyes on the newcomers. Those men look like trouble. Katherine nodded, suddenly eager to return to the ranch. As she passed the saloon on her way to retrieve her horse, she overheard one of the strangers questioning the bartender. Tall fella, dark hair, scar across his right hand, the man was saying. Goes by Hayes these days, we heard. Katherine froze, her heart racing. They were looking for Hunter. She hurried to her horse, trying to appear calm while her mind worked frantically. Should she warn the sheriff that these men were looking for Hunter? But what if Hunter truly had done something wrong? No, she decided. She needed to hear his side first. She rode home faster than was prudent, her worry growing with each mile. When she finally reached the ranch, she found Hunter in the south pasture with the cattle, looking perfectly at ease as he guided them toward better grazing. You're back early, he called as she approached, then frowned as he noticed her expression. What's wrong? There are men in town looking for you, Katherine said without preamble. 3 of them. They were asking at the saloon about a man matching your description. Hunter's face hardened, all warmth vanishing from his eyes. Did they see you? Did they follow you? No, I don't think so, Katherine replied, alarmed by his reaction. Hunter, who are they? He was already turning his horse toward the ranch house. Pack whatever you need for a few days. We're moving the herd tonight. Tonight, Katherine exclaimed, following him. That's not possible. We're not ready, and it's still 10 days until the auction. We don't have 10 days, Hunter said grimly. Those men aren't looking to have a friendly reunion. As they reached the house, Katherine grabbed his arm. Tell me the truth. Who are you running from? What did you do? Hunter dismounted, his movements tense. I told you I was from Texas. What I didn't tell you is that I was a Texas Ranger. Katherine stared at him, confusion replacing fear. A ranger? But why would that make you run? Hunter's jaw tightened. Because I killed a powerful man's son. It was justified. He'd murdered a family during a robbery. But his father was a judge with connections. He made sure I was charged with murder instead. He paused, his eyes meeting hers. I escaped before they could hang me, but I've been running ever since. Katherine absorbed this, relief washing over her. So you're innocent. In the eyes of the law in Texas, no, Hunter corrected her. But I didn't murder anyone, if that's what you're asking. We should tell Sheriff Cooper, Katherine suggested. He could help. No, Hunter cut her off. Cooper's a good man, but he'd be obligated to hold me until he could verify my story. By then, those men would have what they came for. He began gathering supplies. Those 3 are bounty hunters. There's $500 on my head, dead or alive. The same amount as her loan, Katherine realized with a chill. So what do? We drive the cattle now, Hunter said decisively. We'll take them to the next county over. The auction in Billings is smaller, but starts in 3 days. We should get there in time. Billings is nearly 60 miles away. Katherine protested. Which is why we need to leave tonight, Hunter insisted. We'll drive them hard the first night to put distance between us and town. After that, we can pace them better. Katherine knew he was right, but fear clutched at her heart. And what about you? Those men will keep looking. Hunter's expression softened slightly. One problem at a time. First, we save your ranch. They worked quickly, packing supplies and preparing the herd. By dusk, they were ready to move. 30 head of cattle reluctantly beginning the long journey north. Katherine took one last look at the ranch house, wondering when or if she would see it again. The first night was grueling. They pushed the cattle hard, stopping only briefly to rest the animals when absolutely necessary. Katherine, though an experienced rider, found her muscles screaming in protest as dawn broke. Hunter looked equally exhausted but determined. We've made good time, he said as they allowed the herd to graze and drink at a small creek. Probably 15 miles already. Katherine dismounted stiffly, stretching her legs. How much farther to Billings? If we keep this pace, we could make it in 4 days, Hunter replied, handing her a canteen. But I'd rather get there in 3, before those bounty hunters figure out where we've gone. They rested for 2 hours before moving on, settling into a more sustainable pace. Katherine found herself studying Hunter as they rode, seeing him in a new light. A Texas Ranger turned fugitive, risking capture to help her save her ranch. The contradiction both confused and intrigued her. As darkness fell on the second night, they made camp in a sheltered valley. The cattle, exhausted from the drive, settled quickly. Hunter built a small fire, careful to keep it low and shielded to avoid attracting unwanted attention. You should rest, he told Katherine as he handed her a plate of beans and salt pork. I'll take first watch. I'm not too tired to talk, she said, settling beside the fire. Tell me about being a ranger. Hunter's expression grew distant. It was a hard job in hard times. Texas after the war was lawless outlaws, cattle rustlers, land grabbers. Rangers were the only law in many places. Is that why you joined? Katherine asked softly. He nodded. My family's ranch was raided twice before I signed up. Thought maybe I could make a difference. A bitter smile crossed his face. Found out justice isn't always as simple as I'd hoped. Tell me about what happened, Katherine encouraged. With the judge's son. Hunter was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. His name was Jared Claiborne, son of Judge Thomas Claiborne, one of the most powerful men in East Texas. Jared ran with a rough crowd, but his father's influence kept him out of trouble. He paused. Until he couldn't. Katherine waited patiently as Hunter gathered his thoughts. We'd been tracking a gang that hit isolated farms. They didn't just steal, they killed everyone they found. His voice hardened. Found them at a homestead near the Sabine River. 3 men shooting at us from the house, bodies of the family already cooling inside. I took a bullet in the shoulder, but managed to wound one of them, Jared, though I didn't know who he was then. Hunter absently rubbed his right shoulder. The other 2 escaped, but Jared couldn't ride. When I approached him, he drew on me. I fired first. He looked up at Katherine. It was a clean shoot. Any lawman would have done the same. But the judge didn't see it that way, Katherine guessed. Hunter shook his head. Judge Claiborne used every bit of his influence to paint me as a murderer. Claimed his son was innocent, just in the wrong place. Witnesses changed their stories. Evidence disappeared. My own captain couldn't protect me. So you ran? Katherine said softly. Escaped the night before they were to hang me, Hunter confirmed. Been moving north ever since, never staying anywhere long enough to be recognized. Katherine reached out impulsively to take his hand. I'm sorry that happened to you. Hunter looked surprised at her touch, but didn't pull away. Don't be sorry for me. I've made my peace with it. But I am sorry for bringing trouble to your door. You didn't, Katherine insisted. You've been nothing but help since Pa died. Their eyes met across the fire, and Katherine felt something shift between them, a recognition of shared struggles, of understanding that went beyond words. For a moment, she thought Hunter might say more, but he gently withdrew his hand. Get some sleep, he said quietly. Tomorrow will be another long day. The third day of the drive brought new challenges. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising rain. The cattle grew increasingly difficult to manage, sensing the coming storm and growing restless. We need to find shelter before this hits, Hunter called to Katherine as the wind picked up. There's a line of bluffs about 2 miles ahead. Might offer some protection. They pushed the herd harder, racing against the weather. The first fat drops of rain began to fall as they reached the bluffs, which indeed provided a natural windbreak. Hunter quickly found a small cave in the rock face, large enough for them, but not for the cattle. Get inside, he told Katherine as the rain intensified. I'll see to the herd. I can help, she protested, already soaked to the skin. Katherine, Hunter said firmly, please. One of us needs to stay dry to keep the fire going later. Reluctantly, she took shelter in the cave, watching as Hunter worked in the downpour to keep the cattle from scattering. The storm grew fiercer, lightning cracking across the sky and thunder rolling overhead. Katherine gathered wood from the back of the cave, where previous travelers had apparently left a small supply. By the time Hunter finally joined her, he was drenched and shivering. Katherine had managed to start a fire, which cast flickering shadows on the cave walls. The herd, she asked as he ducked inside. Settled as they can be, he replied, water streaming from his hat as he removed it. Lost 2 head that bolted in the lightning, but the rest are huddled against the bluff. Katherine frowned. 2 is better than all of them, I suppose. Here, she added, handing him a blanket from their supplies. You need to get dry. Hunter accepted the blanket gratefully, turning his back to remove his sodden shirt. Katherine caught a glimpse of scars crisscrossing his back before she quickly averted her eyes, giving him privacy. Storm's going to delay us, Hunter said as he wrapped the blanket around his shoulders and moved closer to the fire. Might not make Billings by tomorrow night, as I'd hoped. As long as we get there before the auction ends, Katherine said, passing him jerky from their provisions. And before Hollister can foreclose. They ate in comfortable silence, listening to the storm rage outside. The cave was small, forcing them to sit close beside the fire. Katherine was acutely aware of Hunter's presence, of the scent of rain on his skin and the breadth of his shoulders beneath the blanket. What will you do after? She asked suddenly. After we sell the cattle and pay off Hollister. Hunter prodded the fire with a stick. Move on, I suppose. Can't stay in one place too long. Even if those men don't find you. He shrugged. There'll be others. Bounty's too tempting. Katherine felt an unexpected pang at the thought of him leaving. In just a week, this man had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. You could try clearing your name, she suggested. Write to the governor of Texas, perhaps. Hunter gave a humorless laugh. Judge Claiborne's connections reach all the way to Austin. No, my name won't be cleared unless he admits what his son did. Then what kind of life is that? Katherine pressed. Always running. Never able to build anything lasting? The only kind available to me, Hunter replied simply. He looked at her then, his eyes reflecting the firelight. What about you? What happens after you save the ranch? Katherine sighed. I go back to trying to make it profitable. Alone. You'll manage, Hunter said with surprising confidence. You're stronger than you know, Katherine. She smiled faintly. A week ago, I might not have believed that. But now. She hesitated. Now I think perhaps I am. Outside, the storm began to subside, the thunder growing more distant. Inside the cave, something else was building a tension, an awareness that had been growing between them for days. You should try to sleep, Hunter said, his voice lower than before. I'll keep watch. You need rest too, Katherine pointed out. We can take turns." Hunter nodded, though he made no move to lie down. Instead, he remained seated beside her, their shoulders almost touching in the confined space. "Katherine," he said after a long silence, "I want you to know that whatever happens in Billings, helping you these past days has meant something to me. It's been a long time since I felt." He trailed off, searching for words. "Felt what?" she prompted softly. "Useful," he finished. "Like maybe my life still has purpose." Katherine turned to face him fully, emboldened by the intimacy of the moment. "Your life has purpose, Hunter. You're a good man who was wronged. That doesn't define all you are or all you can be." Their eyes held in the flickering light. Slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, Hunter raised his hand to her cheek. His fingers were rough with calluses, but infinitely gentle as they traced the curve of her face. "In another life," he murmured, "things might have been different." Katherine covered his hand with her own. "Why not this life?" The question hung between them for a heartbeat before Hunter leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that started tentatively but quickly deepened with shared longing. Katherine responded with a hunger that surprised her, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, feeling the strength beneath the blanket. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily. Hunter rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I have nothing to offer you," he whispered. "No name that isn't tainted, no future that isn't uncertain." "I'm not asking for promises," Katherine replied, her heart racing. "Just for tonight." Hunter drew back slightly to look at her, his expression torn between desire and restraint. "Katherine, She silenced him with another kiss, pouring all her newfound feelings into the connection between them. This time, Hunter's restraint crumbled. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer until she was nearly in his lap. The storm outside faded from awareness as they created their own tempest within the cave's shelter. Hands explored with increasing boldness, breaths mingled, and soft sounds of pleasure echoed against stone walls. When Hunter's blanket slipped from his shoulders, Katherine didn't look away from the scars that told of his difficult past. Instead, she traced them gently with her fingertips, accepting all of him. They made love by firelight, finding in each other's arms a sanctuary from the harsh realities that awaited outside. For those precious hours, there were no bounty hunters, no looming debts, no uncertain futures, only the two of them, discovering together what it meant to truly connect with another soul. Afterward, as they lay wrapped in blankets and each other's arms, Katherine rested her head on Hunter's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "We should reach Billings by tomorrow evening if the weather holds," Hunter murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Katherine nodded, unwilling to break the spell of contentment with talk of practical matters. "Hunter," she said instead, "I want you to know that whatever happens, I don't regret this. Any of it." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Nor do I, though perhaps I should." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "Why?" His expression was troubled despite the tenderness in his eyes. "Because I've complicated your life when you needed simplicity. Because I care for you more than I have any right to." Katherine touched his face, feeling the stubble against her palm. "Caring isn't something we control, Hunter. It simply is." He captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Get some sleep. I'll take first watch." Though Katherine wanted to protest, to insist they face whatever came together, she recognized the wisdom in his words. One of them needed to remain alert. Nestling closer to his warmth, she allowed herself to drift into sleep, feeling safer than she had since her father's death. She awoke to gray dawn light filtering into the cave. Hunter was already up, fully dressed, and tending to a small breakfast fire. He smiled when he saw her stir, a smile that reached his eyes and warmed her despite the morning chill. "Storm's past," he reported. "Ground's muddy, but passable. We should be able to make good time today." Katherine sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest, suddenly shy in the light of day. Hunter seemed to sense her discomfort and busied himself with their breakfast, giving her privacy to dress. Once they'd eaten and packed their meager supplies, they set out to check on the cattle. The herd had weathered the storm well, though they'd indeed lost 2 head as Hunter had reported. The animals were hungry, which made them easier to drive once they'd grazed briefly. They rode in companionable silence for most of the morning, both perhaps wondering how to acknowledge what had happened between them without disturbing the comfortable rhythm they'd established. It was Hunter who finally broached the subject as they paused at midday to rest the herd. "About last night," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Katherine met his gaze steadily. "I meant what I said. No regrets." Relief visibly washed over his features. "Good." "Because he stopped abruptly, his attention caught by something in the distance. Riders. Coming fast. Katherine turned to look where he pointed. 3 horsemen approached from the south, the direction of Willow Creek. "The bounty hunters," she breathed, fear clutching at her heart. Hunter was already mounting his horse. "Get the herd moving. Now." "What about you?" Katherine demanded, grabbing his reins. "I'll lead them away from you," he said grimly. "Get the cattle to Billings, Katherine. Save your ranch." "No," she protested. "I won't leave you to face them alone." Hunter's expression softened momentarily. "Katherine, please. I can't put you in danger." "You're not," she insisted. "I'm choosing to stand with you." She gestured toward a rocky outcropping ahead. "We can make a stand there. The cattle will be fine for an hour." Hunter looked torn, glancing between her determined face and the approaching riders. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but you stay behind cover. These men won't hesitate to shoot." They hurried to the outcropping, which provided natural defensive positions. Hunter positioned Katherine behind the largest boulder, then took up his own position with a clear view of the approaching men. "If anything happens to me," he said urgently, "ride for Billings. Don't look back." Katherine wanted to argue, but recognized the steel in his voice. She nodded, though inwardly she had no intention of abandoning him. The riders slowed as they neared the outcropping, clearly aware they were expected. They spread out, approaching from different angles. "Hayes," one called. "We know you're there. Might as well come out peaceful-like." Hunter didn't respond, his rifle trained on the speaker. "Got $500, says you're coming back to Texas," another shouted. "Dead or alive, don't matter to us which." Katherine's hands tightened on her own rifle. These men spoke of Hunter's life as if it were nothing more than the bounty on his head. "Last chance, Hayes," the first man called again. "Or we start shooting." Hunter glanced at Katherine, then shouted back. "I'm not alone. There's a woman with me who has nothing to do with this. Let her go on her way, and we can settle this between us." There was a pause, then laughter. "Nice try, Hayes. We ain't stupid enough to let witnesses go." Katherine's blood ran cold. They intended to kill her too. The first shot came without further warning, shattering rock inches from Hunter's position. He returned fire immediately, forcing one of the bounty hunters to dive for cover. What followed was a tense exchange of gunfire, with neither side gaining advantage. Katherine remained hidden as promised, but kept her rifle ready. When one of the bounty hunters attempted to circle behind their position, she took careful aim and fired, grazing the man's arm. He yelled in pain and retreated. "Good shot," Hunter said with grim approval. The standoff continued for what felt like hours, but was likely only 20 minutes. Ammunition was running low on both sides when a new sound reached them: hoofbeats, approaching fast from the east. "More of them," Katherine whispered fearfully. Hunter shook his head, peering cautiously over the rocks. "No, it's the sheriff. And looks like he's brought help." Indeed, Sheriff Cooper and 3 deputies rode into view, their rifles trained on the bounty hunters. "Drop your weapons," Cooper shouted. "By the authority of Montana Territory." The bounty hunters hesitated, clearly calculating their odds. Finally, seeing themselves outnumbered, they lowered their guns. "Hayes," Cooper called. "You and Miss Bennett can come out now." Hunter exchanged a surprised look with Katherine. "How did he know you were with me?" "I have no idea," she replied, equally baffled. Cautiously, they emerged from their shelter. The bounty hunters were being disarmed and handcuffed by the deputies while Sheriff Cooper approached them. "You two are a hard pair to track down," he said, though there was no anger in his tone. "Gave us quite a chase." "How did you find us?" Hunter asked warily, his hand still near his gun. Cooper dismounted. "Got word yesterday that these 3 were asking about you in every saloon from Willow Creek to Cottonwood. When I heard they were bounty hunters from Texas, I did some checking." He paused. "Telegraphed the Rangers. Got an interesting reply." Hunter tensed. "I'm sure you did." "Seems there's been some developments in your case, Hayes," Cooper continued. "Judge Claiborne died 6 months back. His replacement reviewed several old cases, including yours. The sheriff pulled a folded paper from his vest. This came in yesterday. Official pardon from the governor of Texas. Seems the two men who escaped that day were eventually caught and confessed that Jared Claiborne was indeed part of their gang. Hunter stared at the paper, disbelief written across his face. A pardon. Signed and sealed. Cooper confirmed, handing it to him. You're a free man, Hayes. Katherine watched as Hunter's hands trembled slightly, taking the document. 3 years of running, of looking over his shoulder, of never allowing himself to put down roots, all ended by this single piece of paper. What about them? Hunter asked, nodding toward the bounty hunters. They'll face charges for attempting to murder both of you, Cooper replied. Bounty hunting's legal, but not the way they were going about it. Besides, he added with a significant look, that bounty no longer exists. Relief washed over Katherine, so profound she felt her knees weaken. Hunter must have sensed it, because his arm came around her waist, supporting her. Thank you, Sheriff, Hunter said, his voice rough with emotion. For believing me enough to check. Cooper nodded. Man like you doesn't strike me as a cold-blooded killer, Hayes. Now, you two planning to continue to Billings with those cattle? Katherine explained about the loan and their need to sell the herd before month's end. Hollister's been pressuring quite a few small ranchers lately, Cooper remarked. Man's building himself quite an empire. He looked thoughtfully at the cattle, then back at them. Tell you what, my brother-in-law's the livestock agent in Helena. Pays fair prices, better than you'd get at auction. It's a bit further, but I could wire him to expect you. Hunter and Katherine exchanged glances. That would be very helpful, Katherine said gratefully. With the immediate danger past, the sheriff and his deputies departed with the prisoners, leaving Hunter and Katherine alone with their herd and a future suddenly full of new possibilities. A pardon, Hunter said again, staring at the document as if it might vanish. I never thought. Katherine touched his arm gently. It means you can stop running. He looked at her, wonder and uncertainty warring in his expression. I hardly know how to live any other way anymore. You'll learn, she said softly. Day by day, they resumed their journey, pushing the cattle toward Helena instead of Billings. The mood between them had shifted, lightened by the removal of the threat hanging over Hunter, yet waited with unspoken questions about what would come next. That evening, as they made camp, Hunter seemed distracted, often lapsing into thoughtful silence. Katherine gave him space, understanding he had much to process. As they sat beside the fire after supper, Hunter finally spoke. I've been thinking about what happens after we sell the cattle. Katherine's heart quickened, and he met her gaze directly. I could help you rebuild the ranch. If you wanted. As a hired hand? She asked carefully. Hunter shook his head slowly. No. As a partner. He paused, searching for words. Katherine, I know it's sudden. We've known each other barely 2 weeks. But in that time, you've shown me what it means to have courage, to fight for what matters. His voice deepened. And last night showed me what it might mean to have a home again. Katherine's breath caught. Hunter, are you saying? I'm saying I care for you, he interrupted gently. More than I thought possible after so long alone. I'm saying I want to see where this could lead, if you're willing. Joy bloomed in Katherine's chest, but she tempered it with practicality. The ranch needs a lot of work. It won't be easy. A smile tugged at Hunter's lips. Nothing worthwhile ever is. And the town will talk, she added. A respectable widow taking in a former fugitive. Former being the operative word, Hunter pointed out, holding up his pardon. Besides, I'm not suggesting anything improper. His expression grew serious. Unless you'd consider marriage. Katherine stared at him, her heart hammering. Marriage? Hunter moved closer, taking her hands in his. I know it's fast. Too fast, maybe. But I've spent 3 years running from the past. Now, for the first time, I'm looking toward a future I'd like to build with you, if you'll have me. Tears pricked at Katherine's eyes. Hunter, you don't have to answer now, he said quickly. Take time to think. We still have the cattle to sell, the loan to pay, but I wanted you to know where I stand. Katherine squeezed his hands. I don't need time, she said, her voice clear despite her tears. These past days have shown me more about you than months might have in ordinary circumstances. I've seen your courage, your honor, your kindness. I know what kind of man you are. Hope lit Hunter's eyes. And yes, she replied simply. Yes, I'll marry you. His smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. He pulled her into his arms, capturing her lips in a kiss that spoke of promise and passion in equal measure. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. I have nothing to offer but myself, he murmured, echoing his words from the cave. Katherine smiled, her heart full. That's all I want. They reached Helena 3 days later, the cattle drive successful despite its hurried beginning. As Sheriff Cooper had promised, his brother-in-law offered a fair price enough to pay off Hollister's loan with money to spare for ranch improvements. After completing the sale, Hunter insisted they visit Helena's only jewelry store, where he purchased a simple gold band for Katherine. It's not fancy, he apologized as he slipped it onto her finger. It's perfect, she assured him, admiring how it caught the light. They were married the following day by a local justice of the peace, with Sheriff Cooper's brother-in-law and his wife as witnesses. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, Hunter's voice steady as he recited his vows. I'll give them my last name and my love, he said as he took Katherine's hand in his, placing the gold band on her finger. For as long as we both shall live. Katherine blinked back tears as she replied with her own vows, sealing their union with words that came straight from her heart. The return journey to Willow Creek was leisurely compared to their frantic departure. They traveled as husband and wife, stopping each night to make camp beneath the stars, learning more about each other with every passing day. Hunter spoke of his family in Texas, of the ranch he'd grown up on and the dreams he'd had before the war changed everything. Katherine shared memories of her father, of the lessons he'd taught her about ranching and life. When they finally crested the rise overlooking the Bennett Ranch, now the Hayes Ranch, Katherine felt a sense of homecoming unlike any she'd experienced before. The small house needed work, the fences required repair, and the remaining cattle would need careful management to build back the herd. But with Hunter beside her, those challenges seemed like opportunities rather than burdens. Their arrival in town caused the expected stir. Some, like Mrs. Henderson at the general store, greeted the news of their marriage with surprised congratulations. Others, Hollister among them, were clearly displeased to see Katherine return not only with the loan payment, but with a husband to help manage the ranch. Quite the whirlwind romance, Hollister commented dryly when they visited the bank to settle the debt. I trust you know what you're doing, Mrs. Hayes. Better than you might think, Mr. Hollister, Katherine replied smoothly, signing the final papers that cleared her father's debt. Sheriff Cooper proved to be a staunch ally, making it clear to anyone who asked that Hunter Hayes was not only innocent of any wrongdoing, but had been officially pardoned by the governor of Texas himself. The 3 bounty hunters were sent east to stand trial, their threats against Katherine ensuring they would face serious charges. Spring gave way to summer as Katherine and Hunter worked side by side to rebuild the ranch. They repaired the house, strengthened fences, planted crops, and carefully managed their small herd with an eye toward expansion. The work was hard but satisfying, made lighter by shared purpose and growing love. On warm evenings, they would sit on the porch Katherine's father had built, watching the sun set over land that now truly felt like home to both of them. Sometimes they spoke of the future of children they hoped to have, of improvements to the ranch, of dreams long deferred now within reach. Other times they simply sat in comfortable silence, content in each other's presence. Do you ever regret it? Katherine asked one such evening, 6 months after their hasty wedding in Helena. Staying here instead of starting fresh somewhere else. Hunter considered the question, his arm around her shoulders. Not for a moment, he finally said. This land called to you. Now it calls to me too. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Besides, starting fresh doesn't always mean starting somewhere new. Sometimes it means seeing familiar things through new eyes. Katherine rested her head against his shoulder, her hand finding his. I'm glad you stopped in Willow Creek that day. So am I, Hunter replied, his voice warm with contentment. Though I never expected to find a home when I was still running from my past. Sometimes, Katherine said softly, we find exactly what we need when we're looking for something else entirely. Hunter's hand moved to rest gently on her stomach, where their first child had just begun to make its presence known. And sometimes, he added, what we find is better than anything we dared to hope for. As twilight deepened around them, They remained on the porch, two people who had found in each other the strength to face whatever challenges might come. The ranch would prosper, their family would grow, and the love that had blossomed so unexpectedly in the midst of crisis would continue to deepen with each passing year. For Hunter Hayes, former Texas Ranger and fugitive, the long journey north had led not to continued flight, but to the home and family he had thought forever lost. For Katherine Bennett Hayes, the tragedy of her father's death had eventually brought an unexpected blessing: a partner who understood both her strength and her vulnerability, who shared her love for the land, and helped her build something that would endure. Together, they had transformed a desperate cattle drive into the beginning of a life neither could have imagined alone. And though the path ahead would surely hold its share of difficulties, they would face them as they had faced all else, side by side, their hands joined, their hearts beating as one.